It was a quiet Saturday afternoon in the suburban neighborhood of Willow Creek, a community where lawns were manicured, mailboxes gleamed, and the Homeowners Association, HOA, prided itself on keeping the peace. For the residents, this peace sometimes meant overstepping boundaries, enforcing rules with more zeal than common sense. On this particular day, one black family would find themselves at the center of an absurd and frightening HOA drama that would quickly spiral out of control. Marcus Thompson, a 38-year-old software engineer, was enjoying his weekend with his two kids, Olivia and Jamal, while his wife, Vanessa, a decorated sheriff in the county, was out on patrol. The Thompsons had lived in Willow Creek for 5 years, always respectful of the HOA rules, paying their fees on time and maintaining their property impeccably. Yet, unbeknownst to them, a small faction of the HOA board had been watching their house with growing suspicion. The rumor, seemingly minor, had started innocuously enough. A complaint about trash cans left out for too long, an oversized basketball hoop, a guest parking for more than 2 nights. But in the hands of the HOA president, Martha Reynolds, the concern escalated. For Martha, the color of Marcus's skin added an invisible layer of suspicion to every ordinary action. She decided, without consulting anyone, that this situation needed intervention, and what better way than sending the authorities? But these were not real police officers. Martha had hired 2 men who presented themselves as law enforcement, black SUVs with tinted windows, faux badges clipped to their belts, and an intimidating presence that seemed lifted straight from a cop show. They arrived at the Thompson house, knocking loudly and repeatedly on the door. Inside, Marcus was oblivious to the storm about to hit. He opened the door to the 2 men, immediately sensing something was off. They introduced themselves in booming, commanding voices as officers investigating a HOA-related complaint. Marcus, calm but cautious, asked for identification. One of them fumbled with a fake badge, clearly aware that their performance was being scrutinized. Meanwhile, his children peered from behind him, wide-eyed and frightened. Olivia whispered, "Daddy, why do they look scary?" Marcus forced a reassuring smile, his mind racing. Why would the HOA send cops here? And why did these officers feel so wrong? The men demanded entry, claiming they needed to investigate potential violations. Marcus firmly refused, explaining that they had no legal authority to enter private property. Tensions escalated. The fake officers grew more aggressive, their voices rising as they tried to intimidate him. But Marcus's resolve was unshakable. He knew the law and he knew his rights. Little did these imposters, or the overzealous HOA, know Marcus's wife Vanessa was a sheriff, trained to deal with exactly this kind of lawlessness. Though she was out on patrol, she had ingrained in her family the importance of standing strong and staying calm when confronted by threats. The confrontation stretched on, a surreal mix of fear, defiance, and absurdity. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains, some whispering, some secretly recording, as Marcus navigated the situation with remarkable composure. The afternoon, meant for quiet family time, had transformed into a tense standoff between a man who knew his rights and 2 fake officers emboldened by someone else's prejudices. While Marcus Thompson held his ground at the front door, the tension in the air was palpable. The fake officers, growing increasingly frustrated by his calm defiance, continued their theatrics, raising their voices and waving their counterfeit badges. The neighbors, sensing the confrontation was escalating, had begun to gather quietly along the sidewalks, cameras and phones capturing every moment of the bizarre standoff. Inside the house, Olivia and Jamal huddled together, frightened but trusting their father. "Daddy, why won't they go?" whispered Olivia. Marcus put a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We just wait and stay calm," he said firmly. He knew the key was to avoid giving them any reason to escalate the situation further. At that very moment, Vanessa Thompson, his wife and the county sheriff, was wrapping up a routine patrol several miles away. A sudden alert popped up on her phone, a suspicious police interaction at her home. Recognizing the unusual urgency, she immediately flipped on her siren and raced toward Willow Creek. Her mind raced. Something was off. Why would anyone need law enforcement at her house without alerting her first? Arriving within minutes, Vanessa spotted the black SUVs and the small crowd of neighbors. She could immediately tell that the men claiming to be officers were imposters. With her training, she noted their body language, the sloppy way they handled their badges, and the absence of proper identification. She stepped out of her vehicle, badge in hand, and called out in her authoritative voice, "Step away from the property. Now." The fake officers froze, panic flickering in their eyes. They had no idea who they were confronting. Vanessa approached slowly, every movement measured and commanding. "I am Sheriff Vanessa Thompson. You have no authority here. Leave immediately or I will take action," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. Marcus, watching in awe and relief, opened the door wider. "Honey, thank God," he exclaimed softly. Olivia and Jamal rushed toward their mother, clinging to her as she assessed the situation. Vanessa's presence completely changed the dynamics. The men, once intimidating, now looked like cornered imposters, their bravado collapsing under the weight of real authority. One of the men stammered, trying to explain themselves. We were sent by the HOA," Vanessa cut him off sharply. "That doesn't give you the right to impersonate law enforcement. This is a federal offense. You are leaving my property immediately or I will arrest you myself." The crowd of neighbors murmured among themselves, realizing the absurdity of the situation. Martha Reynolds, the HOA president who had orchestrated this fiasco, had by now been alerted and arrived on the scene, visibly shaken. She had never anticipated that the Thompsons' house belonged to the sheriff herself. As the fake officers hastily retreated to their vehicles, Vanessa Thompson called her department to report the impersonation and secure statements from witnesses. Marcus finally exhaled deeply, grateful for his wife's swift intervention and the protection of her authority. The neighborhood would talk about this incident for weeks. The HOA's overreach, fueled by prejudice and assumptions, had been spectacularly thwarted by the very person they underestimated. The Thompsons, however, emerged stronger, united, and even more respected, proof that courage, calmness, and the presence of real authority could turn a frightening situation into a decisive victory.